Every killer tries to hide their crimes from the police and authorities, but today, we're talking about a serial killer who did the exact opposite. After committing his murders, he would write letters to the police, detailing his victims. This is a chilling and real crime story that has remained unsolved to this day. This serial killer is believed to have taken the lives of over 40 people. But who was this mysterious murderer? To uncover the truth, you'll have to watch this video till the end. So, grab your headphones and prepare yourself for an episode filled with suspense and intrigue. Let's dive into today's extraordinary story. In the heart of Northern California, a chilling game of cat and mouse unfolded. A masked predator emerged from the shadows, taunting police and the public alike with cryptic letters and coded messages, signing each one with a sinister symbol, a circle crossed by a pair of intersecting lines. This wasn't just a killer, it was a mastermind, a phantom who evaded capture for decades while leaving a trail of terror in his wake. He called himself the Zodiac. Over 40 people are believed to have fallen victim to the Zodiac Killer. However, today, we will discuss the stories of the 5 most well-known victims of this infamous murderer. On the night of July 4th, 1969, while the world celebrated Independence Day with fireworks and laughter, 2 lives were about to intersect with unimaginable horror. This is the chilling story of Michael Mageau and Darlene Ferrin, the Zodiac Killer's second known victims. Darlene Elizabeth Ferrin, 22 years old, was a vibrant and outgoing young woman. She worked as a waitress and was known for her infectious energy and love for life. Michael Renaud Mageau, just 19, was shy but friendly, a typical young man enjoying his summer. The two were friends, sharing a bond that led them to Vallejo's Blue Rock Springs Park that fateful night. Blue Rock Springs Park, a peaceful spot often frequented by young couples, became their meeting place. At around 11 p.m., Darlene picked up Michael, and together, they drove to the park. As they sat in Darlene's light brown Corvair, they talked and laughed, unaware that someone was watching them, a shadow lurking in the darkness. Shortly after midnight, another car pulled into the lot, parking just a few feet away. At first, it seemed unthreatening, but after a moment, the car drove off, disappearing into the night. Relieved, Darlene and Michael resumed their conversation. But their peace was short-lived. Moments later, the same car returned, parking directly behind them. This time, its driver stepped out. Shortly after midnight, another car pulled into the lot, parking just a few feet away. At first, it seemed unthreatening, but after a moment, the car drove off, disappearing into the night. Relieved, Darlene and Michael resumed their conversation, but their peace was short-lived. Moments later, the same car returned, parking directly behind them. This time, its driver stepped out. The figure approached their car, holding a bright flashlight that obscured his face. Without warning, he raised a 9mm Luger pistol and began firing. Michael was hit multiple times as he sat in the passenger seat, crying out in pain. Darlene was shot 5 times, her injuries far more severe. As quickly as the attack began, the killer turned and started to walk away. But then, he returned. Realizing that neither of them was dead, he fired additional shots at point-blank range before vanishing into the night. Despite his critical injuries, Michael managed to survive. Bleeding and in shock, he struggled to alert passers-by for help. Darlene, however, wasn't so fortunate. By the time help arrived, she was unconscious and later pronounced dead at the hospital. Michael would later describe the assailant as a heavy-set man in his late 20s or early 30s, wearing dark clothing. But the police were left with more questions than answers. At 12:40 a.m., just hours after the attack, an anonymous call was placed to the Vallejo Police Department. The caller calmly confessed to the crime, giving precise details about the location and the weapon used. "I also killed those kids last year," he said, referring to Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday. The voice on the other end was cold, emotionless, and untraceable. The brutal attack on Michael Mageau and Darlene Ferrin marked the Zodiac Killer's second known crime. and his first attempt to make direct contact with the authorities. But why Darlene and Michael? Was it a random act, or were they targeted? Some speculated that Darlene might have known her killer, as witnesses claimed she seemed uneasy in the days leading up to her death. Others believed it was another random act of terror from a deranged mind. While Michael survived to tell his story, Darlene's life was cut tragically short, leaving her family and friends to grapple with unbearable grief. This attack was only the beginning of the Zodiac Killer's reign of terror, a twisted game of murder, taunts, and puzzles that would confound investigators and haunt the nation for decades to come. Michael Mageau and Darlene Ferrin became unwilling participants in one of history's most infamous mysteries. Their lives changed forever by a man whose identity remains a ghost. On a calm autumn afternoon in 1969, two college students sought solace by the shimmering waters of Lake Berryessa. It was meant to be a relaxing escape from the chaos of life. But that serene day would take a dark, sinister turn, leaving one dead, one scarred for life, and an entire nation gripped with fear. This is the haunting story of Brian Calvin Hartnell and Cecilia Ann Shepard, victims of the Zodiac Killer's third known attack. September 27, 1969. The warm sun hung low in the sky as 20-year-old Cecilia Shepard and 22-year-old Brian Hartnell arrived at Lake Berryessa. The couple, students at Pacific Union College, had been dating for some time and decided to spend the afternoon picnicking by the water. They chose a quiet spot on the shore, enjoying the peaceful surroundings, oblivious to the danger lurking nearby. As they sat talking, a man emerged from the trees behind them. He wore a dark hood over his head, with circular cutouts for his eyes and a strange white crosshair symbol stitched on his chest. The couple froze as he approached. In his hand was a gun, and on his belt, a long knife glinted in the sunlight. The man claimed he was an escaped convict from a Montana prison and needed money in their car to escape to Mexico. Cecilia and Brian, terrified but calm, complied, offering their keys and any cash they had. But the stranger had no intention of leaving them unharmed. He pulled out lengths of pre-cut rope and ordered Cecilia to tie Brian's hands behind his back. Then, he tied her hands. To ensure they couldn't escape, he tightened the knots himself. What happened next was an act of pure evil. Without warning, the man pulled out his knife and began stabbing Brian repeatedly in the back. Brian cried out in pain but remained conscious as the attacker turned to Cecilia, stabbing her multiple times with brutal force. Satisfied with his gruesome work, the man casually walked back to their car and used a black marker to scrawl his symbol and the date of the attack on the car door. It was the Zodiac's chilling signature. After the attacker left, Brian, despite his critical injuries, managed to untie himself. With incredible strength, he crawled to a nearby road to get help. Not long after the attack, the Zodiac Killer made another chilling call to the Napa County Sheriff's Office. Speaking in a calm, detached voice, he confessed to the crime, giving precise details of the location. "I'm the one who killed them," he said before hanging up. The killer's confidence was as unsettling as the crime itself. Investigators found the message left by the Zodiac on Brian's car door, the date, the time of the attack, and the infamous crosshair symbol. This act of arrogance, leaving behind a signature, was a hallmark of the Zodiac Killer. It was not just a crime, but a message. He wanted the world to know he was out there, and he was untouchable. San Francisco, 1969, a city alive with movement, lights, and endless possibilities. But in the shadows of its vibrant streets, a predator lurked, choosing his next victim. On this fateful October night, Paul Lee Stein, a hard-working and kind-hearted cab driver, was about to cross paths with one of the most infamous killers in history, the Zodiac. What unfolded was a crime so cold, so calculated, that it shocked even the most seasoned investigators. This is the haunting story of Paul Lee Stein, the Zodiac Killer's fourth known victim. Paul Lee Stein was a 29-year-old cab driver working late shifts to support himself and his family. On October 11, 1969, he picked up a passenger near the intersection of Mason and Geary Streets in downtown San Francisco. The passenger, a man described as clean-cut, well-dressed, and seemingly ordinary, gave Paul a destination in the upscale Presidio Heights neighborhood. It was a routine fare, or so it seemed. As the cab approached the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets, the man in the back seat made his move. In a swift and brutal act, he pulled out a gun and shot Paul Stine point blank in the back of the head. The car came to a halt, its headlights casting an eerie glow on the empty street. The killer then climbed into the front seat, rifled through Paul's pockets, and took his wallet, car keys, and even tore a piece of his blood-soaked shirt, a grim trophy of his crime. But the killer didn't realize he was being watched. From a nearby home, 3 teenagers saw the horrifying scene unfold. They watched as the man wiped down the cab to remove fingerprints before casually walking away, disappearing into the darkness. This was the last victim of the Zodiac Killer ever noticed. After this, he vanished, leaving no trace. No one saw him again. The questions linger, haunting and unanswered. Who was the Zodiac? Why did he kill? Is he still out there? Still alive? These mysteries, chilling and unresolved, remain in the dark. I hope this video gave you something to think about, even if it leaves more questions than answers. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and cherish the moments that make you happy.